So welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at sanctions that the NTSB has placed on Boeing regarding the Alaska Airlines door plug. Let's take a look at this article by Reuters. The NTSB sanctions Boeing over release of 737 MAX investigation details. The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board said Boeing had blatantly violated its rules by providing non-public investigative information and speculating about possible causes of the January 5th Alaska Airlines door plug emergency during a factory tour attended by dozens of journalists. As a party to many NTSB investigations over the past decades, few entities know the rules better than Boeing, the NTSB said. Now, what does this mean for Boeing? What do these sanctions mean? So the NTSB said Boeing would keep its status as a party to the investigation into the January 5th Alaska Airlines emergency, but would no longer see information produced during its probe into the accident. Boeing will now not be allowed to ask questions of other participants at the hearing on August 6th and 7th. So what did they do? An executive said the plug had been opened on the assembly line without the correct paperwork to fix a quality issue with surrounding rivets and that the missing bolts were not replaced. I'm going to come back to this in a bit. So the team that came in and closed the plug was not responsible for reinstalling the bolts. Elizabeth Lund, Boeing's Senior Vice President of Quality, added. So in March this year, the NTSB Jennifer Homendy told a U.S. Senate hearing Boeing had failed to provide names of employees on its 737 MAX door team for 2 months, drawing criticism from lawmakers. Boeing then quickly provided the names. Now, the NTSB is not focused on finding out who did it. They want to know what the probable cause of the accident was. They're not there to place blame on any individual or assess liability. Now, Elizabeth Lund, she's saying, she's their Senior Vice President of Quality. She's saying there may have been more than one employee. And says the who is the absolute responsibility of the NTSB. Well, we are going to find out in later documents that I show that there probably were more than one employee. That's the whole point. We need to investigate and talk to everybody involved so we can find out what's going on. That's the NTSB's view. That's what they need. That's what the public requires for them to do so that we can never have something like this happen again. Next, we're going to take a look at a news clip covering those documents. Roll the video.
There has been a lot of back and forth in regards to this documentation surrounding the door plug issue. Boeing issuing a statement saying, in quote, if the door plug removal was undocumented, there would be no documentation to share.
Right.
So let's go back to this that I pointed to earlier. Now, words matter, and you have to listen to what they're saying. And an executive said, and I believe this is Elizabeth Lund that's saying this, that the plug had been opened on the assembly line without the correct paperwork to fix a quality issue with surrounding rivets and that missing bolts were not replaced. She didn't say no documentation was produced. She said it was done without the correct paperwork. That is not no documentation. That could be documentation, but documentation that wasn't documented correctly. Words matter. Now let's go on back to the video.
At a Senate hearing just yesterday, NTSB Chair Jennifer Homendy told lawmakers that Boeing is withholding information from her investigators, including records indicating who worked on the door plug that flew off the 737 MAX 9 mid-flight back in January, after a preliminary report found that 4 bolts that helped keep that door plug in place were missing after the panel was removed during a repair job last September. Now, despite repeated requests, Boeing never provided records on that repair or even said if they kept those records.
It's absurd that 2 months later, we don't have that. We know for a fact that there is a team that deals with the doors in Renton. There's an entire team of 25 people and a manager.
Next, we're going to look at this CNN article. Now, Boeing blames paperwork for Alaska Air incident prompting rebuke from safety regulators. We're going to look at what they say about the paperwork. But here we go. At a briefing for journalists at Boeing 737 factory in Renton, Washington, Boeing said that the lack of paperwork is why the 4 bolts needed to hold the door plug in place were never installed before the plane left the factory in October. The workers who needed to install the bolts never had the work order telling them the work needed to be done. Without the bolts, the door plug incident was pretty much inevitable. No sh. Now let's look at the paperwork trail, or the bad paperwork trail, or the lack of paperwork. So the reason the Alaska Air door plug was not properly secured in the first place was because 2 different groups of employees at the plant were charged with doing the work, with one removing and the other reinstalling the door plug as the plane was passing along the assembly line. The first group of employees removed the door plug to address problems with some rivets that were made by a supplier, Spirit Aerosystems, but they didn't generate the paperwork indicating they had removed the door plug along with 4 bolts necessary to hold it in place in order to do that work. So first of all, the paperwork was generated. It was generated in the form of an NCR. An NCR is what is used to make the write-up for the repairs that needed to be done. And anything you do to further that repair needs to be documented on that form. So saying there was no document generated, it was generated, it just wasn't used. When a different group of employees put the plug back in place, Boeing said the employees didn't think the plane would actually fly in that condition. Instead, they were just blocking the hole with the plug to protect the inside of the fuselage from weather as the plane moved outside to a different area of the factory compound. That group of employees often makes those kind of fixes, temporary fixes. If you're doing those type of temporary fixes often, then you could often have this type of incident happening, except that some of these instances might actually be fatal. So you might want to put some procedure in place when you're doing any type of out-of-sequence work, which is what this is, to prevent this from happening. Anybody that works quality control or in maintenance knows this. When a different group of employees put the plug back in place, Boeing says the employees didn't think the plane would actually fly in that condition. Instead, they were just blocking the hole. They do this often. The doors team closes up the aircraft before it is moved. But it's not their responsibility to install the pins. Those employees likely assumed paperwork existed. This is a word you never want to hear in aircraft maintenance. Somebody assumed something. You want to know. You don't want to assume. You want to check. You want to verify. You don't want to make any type of assumption. So they were assuming that the paperwork existed and the paperwork would prompt someone else along the line to install the bolts. But without the paperwork, no one on the assembly line knew that the door plug had ever been removed or that its bolts were missing, Lund said. Now, if you just temporarily installed the door, you still have displaced insulation. You still have the inner panel that's removed. What did you do about that? Did you sign that off? Was that ever written up? Because that was disturbed. So documentation of that is necessary also. Permanent reinstallation is done by another team based on the paperwork showing what jobs were unfinished. But there was no paperwork, so nobody knew to follow up. Next, we have one more article by USA Today where the Senior Vice President of Quality continues to show her incompetence. Let's look at the article. USA Today, Boeing sanctioned over media briefing that provided investigative information, NTSB says. So we're just going to look at a couple short things here. So first of all, Boeing wants you to feel safe. And this is coming from Elizabeth Lund, Boeing's Senior Vice President of Quality. First thing I want to show is a quote taken from that briefing that she gave to the news media. The fact that one employee could not fill out one piece of paperwork in this condition and it could result in an accident was shocking to all of us, she said. No, it wasn't shocking to all of us. It may have been shocking to you, but all of us that know how to do aircraft maintenance and are around it all the time know that the paperwork is one of the most important things that you have to do. As a matter of fact, you should stop early in your shift to make sure all the paperwork is filled out. Everything you've done is documented. A short story. When I was trained in maintenance, I was trained that you document everything before you leave. Just in case on your way home, you die in a traffic accident, the next person to take up that job knows exactly everything you did, what you did, where to pick up, and how to finish the job safely. Next, the who is absolutely in the responsibility of the NTSB. No, it's not the responsibility. It's your responsibility, Boeing. You had one or more employees who failed to fill out one piece of paperwork, and the responsibility to find that employee is on you. It's not the responsibility of the NTSB. The NTSB wants to investigate these employees and find out what happened, how it was allowed to happen, and what can be done to prevent it from happening again. Based on the article, there was no documentation, no responsibility, no communication, maintenance driven by assumption, no follow-up, no understanding of how to investigate a quality escape, not even a basic understanding of how quality control and all of this works together to ensure you produce a safe product. This person has no business acting as a senior vice president of quality or anything to do with quality. So if you like this video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.